So this gentleman here says, is there a guide on how to use Azure without paying through the nose for small personal projects? I will go ahead and share my screen and show you what I am seeing. There we go. Tell me if you can see that. Cool. So he says, is there a guide somewhere on how to use Azure without paying through the nose? And that's valid, as everything seems so expensive. Now, use the cloud that makes you happy. I don't care. If you don't use Azure, that means all the more Azure for me. If you go to azure.com/free, there's a couple things. First, you sign up for the free account, you get $200 credit, and then 12 months of always free. You get 12 months of free services, and then basically a bunch of services stay always free. And if you go through it, you can figure out like what you get. Like every month, you get a free basic VM, free basic Linux, free basic Windows, blah 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 blah. And then these other things are free always. You can have like up to 10 free apps and stuff like that. So, yada, 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 free. But let's talk about how to actually do real stuff. Now, I used to run a small, I now run a medium. I have 17 apps in it. That includes my podcast. So this is running in Azure and it's free. And I've run, all my different apps. I've got like babysmash.com and a bunch of different apps. But let's go and do something kind of real, because he wanted to go and make some containers. And I thought it'd be cool to do a couple of containers. So I could go and make an app service. Okay, these are all my different apps that I run. So I'll go and say, make an app service. You can do WordPress and all that kind of stuff. But the gentleman wanted to know about containers. So I'll say, make a web app, create a web app. And when I do that, we'll say fancy pants. Fancy pants. Apparently, someone already has a fancy pants. Fancy pants 911. I don't know. And I could say, put it in my free trial or put it in my pay as you go. Doesn't really matter. I'm throwing it in my MSDN, but you can put it anywhere. And I want to make a resource group. A resource group is just a name. Free Docker stuff. But when I want to delete everything, I delete the resource group. But the resource group is like drawing a dotted line around something. And here's the important part. Under app service plan, we're going to make a new plan. So you can have many apps on a plan. Web app sits on top of basically a virtual machine. I'm going to say create new. And I'm going to say Docker right here. Okay. So we're going to make it not a Windows, not a Linux, but a Docker app service plan. Hansel Docker. In West US. Now, you see where it says pricing tier right here? You go in here and you go under dev test. You can do a basic. A basic is almost 2 gigs of RAM and it's $30 a month. And you can have as many containers as you can fit in $30, $32. Depends on whatever. That means you can do custom domains, you can scale them independently, you can, 10 gigs of disk storage. And the first basic is free for a month. So you can try this out. If you don't like it, you can toss it. Now I'm just going to do that right now. So I'm actually going to make this now. And now here, where it says configure container, this is kind of cool. You can pop something in, a quick start or whatever. You could pull it out of the Docker Hub, or we make your own registry. Now, Glenn Condren and I made Fancy Pants a while back, 2 years ago. Glenn C. Fancy Pants. Okay. I'm just going to go and say Docker Hub public registry, and I'm going to bring in Glenn's Fancy Pants. It's an ASP.NET Hello World application. Okay. So hit OK. We're going to create the app and the plan and throw in the container all at the same time. Now, when I hit create, it says validating. It's thinking about it. It's going to pop up into my notifications list over here. See? So it's deploying to the free Docker stuff group. It's doing that in the background. And even if I close all this stuff, go back to the dashboard, you see it's thinking. It's deploying. It's doing its thing. And if I go here to resource groups, here's free Docker stuff. Okay. And I can pin this. See the little pin? I'm going to hit pin. If I go back to the dashboard, I pinned it. I can configure the dashboard and do stuff. So here's my plan. See, it's got one app in it. Okay. It's a basic. And you can scale it up and down however it makes you happy. Okay, there you go. Deployment, it's doing its thing. I can go to that resource. So that little thing just popped up, Fancy Pants 911 just finished. They're warning me when the trial will stop. And I can click on container settings. You can see it's going to download the logs. I can set up a webhook if I want to, so that when I push to Docker Hub, it will automatically update that container, et cetera, and I'll be able to see those logs. So that's going to fire up in a second. Right now, it's pulling the containers. Okay. Again, that's inside of this resource group, inside of that plan. Remember, that plan only has right now one app. Okay. If I go in here, there's that one app, right? Fancy Pants. Okay. I can say, make another app service. And let's do a web app. We'll do my actual podcast again. Okay. So we'll go and make my my Hansel Minutes podcast again. What am I doing here? That one's done. Create resource, web app, thinking. What am I doing here? Sorry. App service. Make a new one. Make a web app. Create. Hansel doc. Okay, putting it in the same resource group. And again, the resource group is just so I can delete it all when I'm done. Docker. Okay. Now, same plan. So I'm putting as many containers as I can fit into this plan. And when I say configure container, I'm not going to say Docker Hub. I'm going to say container registry. So I don't want to put my podcast. It's my code. It's personal, right? I don't want to put it up there. I'm going to stick it here on, not on the Docker Hub. I'm going to put it in my own registry. Okay. So it's asking me to go and make my own container registry. So we're going to just open another tab here, because I'm going to leave this one here open. Okay. And we'll log in on another tab. And I'm going to make a container registry. Create a resource, containers, container registry. And we'll call it Hansel Registry. I'm going to put it in that Docker one. Okay. Basic, cheap. Don't do premium, don't do all that stuff. Okay. See how it keeps saying deployment in progress? It's that resource, that free Docker stuff resource. That's where everything is going. So here, if I click on free Docker stuff, you can see Fancy Pants is done. There's Fancy Pants 911. You can see the plan, the registry, it's all in the same group. And you can actually see the status of what's going on. In this case here, the registry is happening. Okay. All right. Now, I can go over here and say, I want an Azure container registry, which is deploying right now. So it's a little mad at me because it's not there yet. In a second, that's going to appear. And what I'm going to do is on my local machine here, this is my podcast. Okay. I am going to log in to that registry. Right. And the password is going to be my admin key. Here's the registry. I've got 10 gigs. Add access keys. Here's my password. Okay, login succeeded. Now I've gone and built a Docker image already and tagged it cancel registry podcast a little bit ago. And I can go and run that locally like this. Docker run. There's my podcast right there. So I'm going to go and push it. I'm pushing it not to Docker. I'm pushing it to cancel registry up in Azure and tagging it podcast. It's not very big. It's a .NET app, but it's, 100 megs, couple hundred megs. I could make it smaller. It's using Alpine. Okay. If I go back over here to my registry, the quota in a little bit will fill up. I can click on repositories. In a minute here, it's going to start up. Now I'm moving pretty fast. So you can tell Azure is not too happy with me because I'm moving so fast. There you go. See, it's already filling up with stuff. You will get little errors like this where it's mad about this or mad about that because I'm moving too fast. There's a lot of concurrency type issues. Now, what did we end up calling this one? Cancel Azure. What are you saying to me? Unauthorized? Yeah, you know I'm authorized. Well, it's mad about that, but trust me, it's up there. And in a little bit, it will figure it out and let me go and see it. Because I know that the space got taken up. You'll be able to see how many times an image has been pulled. There it is. Repositories, podcast, latest. Here you go. See? And check this out. Those are the layers, right? And their size and the SHA hash associated with them. Now, here's the cool part. So I've pushed the podcast to that repository. It's my own personal repository. I can do this. I could say run instance and run that container directly from Azure container instances. Because some containers, they fire up, they run for a couple of seconds, and then they disappear. That's per second billing. Okay, that's called ACI or Azure container instances. That's appropriate for like small jobs that run for a couple of minutes. But I'm going to go and say deploy to web app. Okay, so this is cool. We'll say Hansel Man podcast. Remember my resource group, free Docker stuff. App service plan, the basic Docker plan. Remember, I've already got Fancy Pants running over there. This is automatically going to set up a webhook so that every time I push to my registry, it will automatically update the site. Again, I clicked here and I said deploy to web app. Okay. Okay, create. So this is a web app for containers. Again, you see that asynchronous thing happening up there. It's in the resource group free Docker stuff. I go over to free Docker stuff. You can see Fancy Pants 911. That's the one that we made before. That's Glen C Fancy Pants, which you can run yourself. That's sitting inside of this app service plan, meaning in the VM, right? I can look at this plan. You can see it's free. It's free for 30 days, and then it's $30. I'm using 5% of the memory. Now it's starting to build on that one, so it's up to 60%, right? And I can go and see how hard the CPU is going. There you go. It just deployed. See the data in, the data out. Go and see the apps. Hanselman Podcast is one of the apps that's in a container, that's in that thing. And then the first time it hits it, it's going to go and do that pull. But before that happens, we can see the data in and data out will start showing up there. And if I go to container settings, it automatically set up the local registry, right? That's the Azure container registry, not the Docker Hub one. So it's a private registry. My login and my password. And then the logs Those are the same logs that you would see if I were to go and do this. Right, so that's local port 8000, localhost 8000. That's going to go and load my podcast locally. Okay. There you go. Here's the show. Now that ran fast. Why? Because I've already got the somewhat, 500 megs of whatever. This layer here, plus a couple more layers. The dot, here you go. This layer here, plus the ASP.NET Core runtime. So 500 plus megs already downloaded. The SDK is 2 gigs, but we're not using it because I did the build locally. So when I said Docker build, I actually have it in a script here. I do that build locally, and then I have the runtime separate. We'll talk about it. You can take a look at my blog for that. So boom, there you go. HanselmanPodcast.AzureWebsites.net. That's now running up there as one of the containers, except it's in a private container. We back up and go back to Hansel Docker Plan. Fancy Pants 911 is Fancy Pants 911 is right here, right? Real website doing its thing, hanging out. This podcast is up here. It's under Azure Websites, so it's got SSL. Each one of them can be individually managed, but they're in containers. And I can go in here to like application settings on that one here. Turn on HTTP, make it always on or not, decide whether FTP access is there or not, et cetera, right? Setting connection strings to databases and whatnot. When I did container settings, I want to point out that I did a single container, but I could also do a Docker Compose or a Kubernetes and run that as well, all sitting on top of that plan. Now, if that starts to be a problem, like let's say it's going to be high memory or something like that, right? I could go and scale this up. So I can go and say scale up. Right now, I'm using the $30 one, but let's say it's busy, in the daytime or something. I could switch over to the $44 one, so it's $10 more. I would get then auto scale. I'd get daily backups, and then you can go, and this is important. They want you to buy the expensive stuff, but you can also go S1, S2, S3. So you can say, well, I'm going to use $44 a month on the weekends, and then this one here on the weekdays or whatever. And I want to point out, if I go back to my dashboard, my app service plan that I'm running is a medium, but you can do a basic small as well. Remember that I put it all in this resource group called Free Docker Stuff? That's just a named group. So within there is a website, a plan, a website, the registry itself, and the webhook, all dealt as one thing. I can then go and delete the whole thing, and this can all be scripted. So this is important to point out. You can make this stuff, run it, do your thing, and then shut it down. So I actually have a couple of websites that I start up for a couple of days, a month, and then I shut them off. And then with Azure Container Registries, I can go over here and say Azure Container Instances, pardon me. I can go and fire up a container at any moment, right? So I can say container foo and pull in Glenn C, Fancy Pants, and just fire up a single instance container, do its thing, and then delete it. And then that's per second billing. So ACI pricing Azure. Right. So that way it's like, whatever 00012 per virtual CPU or whatever. So you wouldn't want to necessarily run. There you go. So this is right. This much memory, this much virtual CPU, da 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 da. I don't think you would necessarily maybe run 24/7. You would just run it, do the job, and get out. So if you had a do it job that was living inside of a container, you can go and do that. And they go and they explain to you step by step by step, and whether or not you want to pay for support. But it's cool because you can get in, do the job, and get out. And they have a whole calculator here to explain, like, if that would be a good idea or not. So that is, oh, by the way, that should be shut down now, right? Because I deleted it. There you go. Website's still on. Is Fancy Pants gone? Fancy Pants gone. And I just deleted it. So I can go back over to all resources and make sure that I don't have anything running in the background that's going to cost me money. Okay. So that is, I don't know how long that took. What was that? I don't even know how this is working. Let me look at YouTube. I could actually go to YouTube and see if you all are still here. There's us talking to ourselves, watching me. 22 minutes. There you go. Hi, everyone. So here's some people saying Simplecast. So Simplecast is the back end for the podcast. My blog is using DOS blog, DAS blog, which is up here and managed by Mark Downey. We haven't got it running in a container yet, but DOS blog core is on ASP.NET Core, and I run DOS blog proper, which is right here. Okay. The podcast, though, is, like I said, we're using Simplecast, so thank you for that, Radium. Web app outgrows the migration, moving the container to big container. Yeah, absolutely. You can, because it's a container, right, you could front it with a traffic manager or virtual, do a VIP swap and move the IPs. So you can have your DNS pointing to an IP and the IP pointing to a web app, or you can just upgrade it. So like I recently took my web app and took it from small to medium, and that was totally, no problem at all. So yeah, it's totally up to you. But just wanted to show you that, and that took about 23 minutes, and it's super fun, and it's cheap. So you really just have to pay attention and pack the containers in as tightly as possible, because you don't want to spend any more money as possible. No reason to have a medium when you only need a small or a basic. That's my perspective. So I hope that answered the question that the gentleman tweeted, and I'll see you all later. Bye.